Okay, we're good to go.
Hey, welcome again to the weekly thing, the third week. I hope you all had a fantastic week last week. And this week, I think we have yet another interesting set of issues for you. But before we get to the issues, let's go through the demos so I can see we can also the awesome things you all did last week. Which team would like to go first?
Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
Harris. Good, and you?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, we already started the meeting. We're about to go through the demos.
Perfect.
Yeah. So who wants to go first for their team demo? The nice silence. Sandra looks like she's about to speak up, so
Okay. Well, we have agreed with Cassandra that I'm gonna talk about the demo, and she's gonna walk us through the code. So let me just share the host disabled participants. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
I just enabled it, so try again, please.
Okay. Just give me a second, sorry, just need to.
by the way, Aris, you can take over the demo since you are in charge of that this week.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, well, pretty much the things rolls in itself since we did that already last week. So yeah, I don't have much to add. Just yeah.
Okay, Sandra, you can go on, continue that.
Okay, so I'm gonna share now. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
I don't know if I shared the whole screen, but hopefully you can see all the. Sorry, what can you see at the moment? The UI.
Your Chrome.
Yeah, your browser. Yeah.
With 4 tabs, and we can see the entire smart shopping list page.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yes. Cassandra and I have been tasked to develop the feature stated in the issue number 5. I don't know if you can see the GitHub. Yeah. So as a user, I want to join an existing shopping list so I can share a shopping list with another person. So the goal of this feature is to allow users to join existing shopping lists and manage them with friends or family. So for the purpose of this demo, I will use an already created token from the Firebase database. So which is this my list, my test list. So the form has been created in the home view, and is this one here, enter list token. So the user can input some 3-word token into this field. And the user can submit the form by clicking this join and exist list, or by just with the enter key. So I'm gonna do it I'm gonna click the join an existing list. So if the list exists, the user is shown the items in that list. As we can see all the items here. But if the list doesn't exist, or if the user types an incorrect token, for example, I'm just gonna delete the token from the local storage. So for example, if the user uses an incorrect token like this one, an error message will be displayed. List does not exist. Well, that's all for me. This is the functionality we have created and the demo. I think, well, Cassandra will talk us through the code. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra. Can I just say I really enjoyed the assert and je ne sais quoi on your list. I think that's a good thing to always have.
Yeah, yeah, it was there. I think that's the original list that we have from the beginning.
No, but like, I also find like when you're testing something a lot, you just run out of things, smart things to
Yeah.
write, so you start writing silly things.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, after one point, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, so on.
Thank you very much. So I don't know if so do you have any questions?
Not from my part. I also did the code review, so yeah,
Okay, thanks.
I've seen it.
Hello, good evening. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
I will walk you through the code. Just as Sandra said, our issue for the week was to, as a user, I want to join an existing shopping list so I can share a list with another person. So, continuing from what she said, this is the function for the handle join list. Okay, we're able to create it so that, okay, we passed in the token, that's the user input. And then using the stream list item, just as it was hinted here, stream list takes a list token so it can communicate with our database and then calls a callback function with a snapshot. So we kind of checked the database. It kind of did an API call of the database to check if to check the existing token already, the ones that are valid, and then how to compare with what the user will impute eventually. So the stream list in line 65 it brought back a response stored in snapshot, and then we have to create a variable next data to hold the response. Then we have to check if the content is equal to 0. That means that the list does not exist, because basically the list should have items in it. So once the content is equal to 0, it means that we created a state for the set error to show that the list does not exist. Then else, once there is a content, when there are items in it, that means that the list exists, and then we're able to save it to local storage. That's line 71. And line 7 to display it in lists. We kind of made the user to navigate to the list automatically once such token exists. Then going down to line 94 to 96, that's where we'll pass the probes down to the home. Then going to the home file, where we created the form. Yes, so when we created the form, we are able to create the form. The on change line 27, what it does is that it listens for the change event, so that it targets whatever the user will impute and then updates the set token with such value. Then we created the submit function, handle submit function, prevented default, and then pass down the props that we created from the other file, and then putting in the token that the user will type. So that's just what the code says. I don't know if you have any question.
Question? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm saying if there's any questions, I'm done.
Does anyone have any comment? Eva, Aris?
Yeah, I just my on line 12 where you're console logging the token, because this is client side, we just have to be careful when we console log these things client side, because this will show in the browser, the user's browser, and tokens. So generally when we don't want to share these kind of things with just any user, so that console log I would say is best to remove it. Just because any kind of sensitive database token information should not be shown to the user.
Oh, sorry, I did this some minutes ago, so it's not in the ones that we merged.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have to remove it
Oh,
now.
okay. No worries. It's just I just just wanted to share. It's something very commonly that people, because we all like console logging. I love it. But we just have to be careful when we console log client side, so not server, but client in the user's browser, to not expose any sensitive information. Yeah.
Okay, all right then. Thank you.
Good job, otherwise.
Thanks.
But is that a secret token, or is that just the collection name? Because I assume those tokens are the same collection name you enter from the UI.
Yes, that's also the kind of the value for the set state, the value for the state I created.
Okay. Yeah, I think the code is fine. I just have a question. I got a bit confused, or I'm not confused, but I have a question regarding the props you passed to the components. I see you passed the. If you can go back to the code again.
Yeah, can you see it?
Yeah, so you're passing the handle join list,
Yeah.
and can you go to the top? I can't see the props. Oh, why do you pass the props? Maybe scroll down.
You mean like the
I
error
think
message?
no, where you send the props to the home component, I think you passed in a few props. Just scroll down a bit more to the home. Yeah, I think here. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious if this handle create list and the join list error message. I'm curious why, if it's possible to have it inside the home component, and then the home component is with showing the error message, and also this with joining the list or creating a list. And then I assume when you join a list, it will redirect you also to the home page, and then you have the tokens also for the app, and you can still get the list. And in that case, it doesn't have to be passed down as props and all handled within the component. I just asked because usually if the component that deals with this can be able to join a list from the same component or display the error messages, then you don't have to have like cascading passing down props down to from the parents to the children, because if it's possible to avoid that, otherwise it will be a case where whenever you set states or update the states, which I think is being also passed down to from the parent to the child, it will render both the parent and the child all together, and probably might be something you can avoid some renders in this case. Or also, it, in my opinion, it could read better than having a lot of props. So is it possible that those functions and states can be contained within the component itself?
Okay, so we only did line 95 to 96. So I already thought it's a convention because I saw the handle create list already passed like this. So but I may have to review it as you said. But we are not the ones that did that of line 94, the create list. It's that of last week.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious to if that's possible, but it's probably something just to have. Doesn't mean it doesn't work or it's wrong. Yeah, just something to think about maybe for next time, or if you have refactoring, if it's something you can do within the component and your app still handles it properly, then you don't necessarily need to pass all the props from the parents. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, aside from
Yes,
that,
thank you.
looks all perfect for me.
Thank you.
Well, any questions from your peers? Mike, Carl, Karen, any question?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So thank you so much, Sandra and Cassandra. Feels like I'm going to have a bite my tongue
You.
seeing Cassandra so fast.
Yeah, similar.
So who wants to go first, Michael or Karen?
I think I'll go first. We both agreed I'll go over the demo, and then Karen will take the code. So let me just let me share my screen. Code. Sorry. Yeah, I think so. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So the issue for the week was to create, or last week was to create a filter, a filter is a search box, a filter for the items in the list. So he said for what was required, we're required to when we type in any word into this search box, it does not need to start from the beginning. I think the word doesn't have to be the starting, like the beginning of the item name, but then once it matches any item, any alphabet within the name, then you should be able to filter that particular item. So and we're able to achieve this. So if I type into this search box now, say maybe TV, then I get a TV. If I type maybe a G or search for any item basically, so it works perfectly. And then also said we're supposed to have, so once you're typing into the box, an X is supposed to appear within the box where you can cancel your typing like this, and we're able to also add that feature. So yeah, and that's basically it.
Can I just make a small comment? Mike, when you do the X button, can you type something?
Okay.
Yeah, if you hover over the X, I think it would be good to have the cursor pointer. Like that's like a standard when you hover over a interactive element. It's good to do the on hover cursor pointer, you know, like the little hand with 5 fingers.
Yeah. So that means we'll have to use we'll have to add a custom X within the box, because currently what we did was we just used a type search that gave us except if there is a way to target it, although I'm not sure. But then currently we are using a type. So within the search box, within the code, we're using the input field. We're using a type search. So that is what's giving us this.
Okay.
But then if we want to do it so that the pointer changes to the hand, I think we may need to build a custom X within the box. So maybe that'll work.
Interesting.
I guess that's the default browsers.
That's
Pardon?
what?
I guess that's the default browser setup, but also if you like to change this, I think based on what Eve suggested, it's possible. I guess there should be some CSS selectors to be able to modify the cursor pointers, most likely.
Yeah, probably. I will have to maybe if I do I'll check that out. Really. I'll check, but the only solution I can think of right now that I can see working for it is to build maybe like a custom I'll call it the button where you can hover and click on it, and it works that way.
Well, let us know what you find out, Mike.
All right. Thank you. All right, Karen, I think you can go with the code.
Okay, can everybody see the code?
Yeah.
Yes.
Am I on the right page?
Yep.
Yes, I am. Okay. So the first thing that we did within the list view was we set some state. So we set search query state, and the method associated with it was set search query. And then we went on to add a function called filter list, which takes the data and goes over it item by item and compares the name, or compares any part of the item's name rather, as Mike said, to the search query. And both of those are to lowercase because includes is case sensitive. So we wanted to make sure we were comparing exactly the same things. So set search query is down here in the on change. So as the user types, they are kind of setting the search query as they go along. And filter list returns the filter. Oh, sorry. It would just fill out. Beg my pardon. Returns the a list of the data that then matches. So if we come down here, in the return statement, we are calling the filter list function and then mapping over it as we were before with the unfiltered data. So for each of the items in the filter list, we're displaying the list item component on the screen. I think that was, yeah, I think that's everything from the code. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, just a small comment from me. I also left it on your code review that you don't actually need to have a function here. You just can do you can declare the filter data in your code and avoid creating a function and calling it again on your return, on your JSX. Yeah, that's just it. And probably not, it's not necessary now, but probably in the future, just a small comment that you may consider, if your component does more things, you may consider to mutate this filter data, because it can, since you iterate on the array, it's a costly function to do every time you render. So moving on, you may want to mutate it, but for now it's great. Not
So
yes. Do they use mutation so that it doesn't run every time something else changes beside the search query? Yeah, that's just my comment.
Okay, so what you were saying at the start is we could take out the function and just take out function and just essentially declare the variable filtered data and then filter it, and then we could have filtered data down here rather than calling the function.
I didn't catch that. Can you come again, please?
Yeah. That's sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, that's exactly what I said. Did that make any sense at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Great.
I just a general comment, like this in React world, this performance optimization, because we deal with UIs like interfaces and displaying large sets of data. Sooner or later you will come across this issue, like how do we make our functions more performant? Maybe some of you have come across memoization, where you kind of cache like heavy calculations in your little data store. But yeah, like if you are serious about, like if you want to be like a React front-end developer, this is a very important topic, as well as search itself, like searching and filtering, because oftentimes we deal with like sets of data and then how do we manipulate it in different ways. So it is like at a core of I would say front end and UI development.
So just to be clear, I just want to understand what optimization Aristo spoke about. So do you mean we use something like a use callback or to optimize a function, or we shouldn't use a function at all?
First of all, you don't need to use the function because you declare function and then you call it and use it as a variable. So you actually have a function that the only thing that it does, it calculates a variable and then returns. So it returns it. So you can simply calculate that variable and just pass it down to your component. And regarding optimizing, well, it's not optimization, it's mutation. So for now, it's okay because the component is very simple and nothing happens in it. But imagine having other functionalities like filtering on your data and stuff. So at that point, this is a variable that iterates through a data set, which is an array. So it's a costly function. So you don't have to run every time your component, something inside your component changes. So at some point, you may consider that you want to do a use mutation there, so that it runs only when the search query changes.
Yeah. All right.
But these are two different comments. The one is regarding that you don't need the function, and another one is more about, for the sake of the discussion, just, thinking about that as well when you build your components. And of course, you don't have, to overthink everything that you make in React, but just have it in mind. And when you see that you need to do it, work on it.
All right. Thank you.
A pleasure.
I think that ties to my other comments to Sandra's work earlier. In terms of when you work, you try to also think have consideration of performance in mind, because anything you do would likely work like passing down a lot of props, but you can pass a lot of props and you change state always, and each time you set state, your component renders, and not just the component where you're setting the state, all the child component that ties together with it, they all have to render. So if you don't have those considerations and you have a lot of parent-child relationship, like very long descendants, and something changes in the parent, you have a very long ripple effect. And if user is on a slow device, sometimes, and with a lot of data, computing this every few milliseconds over and over would not be a good UX experience. And maybe you're on a Mac on a fast network and you might not experience it, but in production, this might be issue. So always taking into consideration the prop tree, your component tree rather, and how often state is changing. So I think that's what Eve tries to talk about in terms of keeping in mind performance, or rather Eva, sorry.
All right, but okay, so something like Redux solves for this problem, doesn't it? Like it prevents you having to prop drill every time, so you shouldn't have that issue of slowing down your components.
It prevents prop drilling, but it doesn't prevent rendering. So it just gives you a way to have global state, and dealing with global state is different from when you want to avoid prop drilling. How you can avoid prop drilling, this depends on how you design or your component tree. And in my opinion, that doesn't have to do with Redux or any global state. From experience working with many teams, it's very easy to reach for like Redux or Sustand, and you think, okay, you don't have to do prop drilling, but still yet, when you change state, And then in this case, it might even have more effect, and maybe you have a global state, and then that state is used by many areas of your app. It will re-render everything, even if they are unrelated, but as long as they are using the same Redux store. And if you don't understand that, that even has more complexities with it, because you cannot really tie in what state change what, because now they are a bit decoupled to some extent. And so that you avoid prop drilling with that if you have a lot many components, unrelated component that wants to use the same data, but that still doesn't help you solve the performance problem. So if you use a tool like Redux, you should also consider if those unrelated components are sharing the same Redux store, because if they are, as long as you change updates the state in the Redux store, and it might not be related to that, it will still cause a re-render for it.
Yeah. So how do you make sure? Sorry, I'm dragging this because I use Redux a lot. So how do you ensure that it doesn't render your application every time? Is there some tool you have to? Yeah.
No, it's not about a tool. I mean, yeah, probably Eva or Aris can jump in later. It's more about how you design the solution. So you have, let's say you have an e-commerce store, or like you have a dashboard, and you have on the left side, you have a navigation with some real-time components changing, maybe showing the status of maybe the total sales made for a product. And then you have a different form where you are just showing a form to update the inventory. And those data are likely unrelated. If they both use the same Redux store and you update one data, they're most likely it would also cause the other guy who is using the same store to recompute the states. But if they are using different store, they would not have to render again. So in this case, it's more about seeing cases where you can separate those data into store. But if you don't choose to use a global state management, you can think of it like if they are unrelated, how to forgotten the term for it, but rather how to design the data assets so that they are unrelated. In that case, when you are updating or retrieving states, unrelated UI components are not affected.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
I agree totally. I only want to add that it doesn't mean that because you will have re-renders that it will break your app. Just you should be aware of that event and manage it properly. Right? It doesn't mean that your app will be slow necessarily or anything. Of course, if you overdo it, at some point it will happen to delay your app. But as long as you know about that effect and you design your app correctly and you manage things properly, you should be fine. So yeah, because now with all the side effects in React, developers tend to to overanalyze anything. We tend to overanalyze anything and to try to optimize every little thing, and many times it's simply not needed.
I just wanted to say also as well that it kind of shows like we are obsessed with new things, and sometimes we don't take the time to understand basic like HTML. Like HTML is so powerful, and yet people design React components, but you could just use like an HTML prop and it would do the same thing or better, right? Like a famous thing is like for login forms, people write like regexes to like, is this an email? Validate, is this an email? It's like a huge regex that you copy from like Stack Overflow. But if you just go and say input is email, HTML will do that all for you. And I feel like with React, it's like this as well, like, oh, use callback and like just actively decide when something is re-rendered. But oftentimes the issue is that people are a bit careless with their data and their design. And I think I understood Peter's comment more like as a general, let's be careful, like, is the data or the state that we're using here, that we are defining here, is it used in this component? Because like sometimes what we do is we have like it's very handy, you know, like you have an app component that knows everything and then just pass things down. But that's kind of dangerous, right? Because the app maybe doesn't need half of those things. And it's better to define those states like further down only when they're needed. So it's more like thinking about like the architecture of our app, which things are like parent-child, which are siblings, where is data consumed, is it used only once? Because the thing with Redux is also, it's only really useful when you are dealing with the same state, but like in different parts of the app. Because like now you can get away with like the context API or like simpler solutions, because Redux is like a very heavy-handed tool that requires a lot of bloated code.
Yeah.
Like I've done a lot of that, and it's not so nice.
Yeah, and if you want my opinion, Redux is not that much needed anymore with all the advancements that React has made and in the ecosystem. So
It depends again.
of course it depends, of course, but I don't know. More often than not,
I would say like local storage like is one thing. Then like the Zustand that Peter mentioned, that you can just like define like your local tiny stores. We have use state. We also have use reducer, which is like a more complex state management. But again, you don't need to like a library for that. So there's like different ways before you go for Redux, which is like the bazooka of the states.
exactly.
But yeah, it's a good question, and it's just the fact that we're talking about it, you know that this is a thing in React world.
Yeah.
Like till now, forever, lots of conversations are about this still.
Yeah, and there is not a silver bullet for everything. Just in each case, you get to decide what suits you best for what you're going to do. So
Yeah. And in that case, like understanding the basics, like Eva said, is very vital, because if you understand when to use reducer, in my opinion, once you've designed your component hierarchy properly, then most times you just need a use reducer rather than dropping in Redux. Probably in your app, maybe you only need a very small use case for a global state. And in that case, maybe React context might just be the only thing you need. So like knowing those basics really helps you make a decision on the best way to design your system. And in terms of the component design, I guess in a general programming sense, the concept of separation of concern and the single responsibility principle is a good guiding way to help you, not just in React, but in different parts of your coding, even in design, writing functions, where you know that your function only does one thing and does it well, and you don't have to, those concepts are things that can guide you in designing those solutions. I hope we've not complicated with too much design or performance topics in just one call.
No, it was good. It's something I've been thinking about really. I've been thinking of going to optimize most of my previous projects, and I think it's something that I really need to look at.
Yeah. When people think of optimization, most times I say like use memo, use callback. For me, whenever I see use memo or use callback when I'm reviewing code, it just sparks a different part of my brain, and I'm watching out for most likely there should be a different way, because in many cases people reach for that because some other parts of the system are not properly designed and they run into bugs or issues, and then it's easy to just patch it up. In my opinion, just patch it up with the use memo or use callback, and it looks fine, but it's something that could have been redesigned properly, but you just make a patch with the use memo. So I always look out for that. Another one I also look out for is use effect. I see it's used a lot in many cases that I think does not need to, but everyone thinks so. Use effect is nice, and everywhere it's just a lot of use effect, and which is even harder to debug when you run into issues with use effect.
I mean, use effect without the dependency array, which means that it runs like on every re-render. That is
That's okay. That's a crime. But
That's
you
suicide, really.
jumped in a huge debate now regarding use effect. Yeah, we can talk for a long time. I tend to avoid it. I'm not a huge fan, but it's times that there are times that you need it, anyways. But yeah, more often than not, you can do the things that you do without it, and it's more close to the hooks React mentality after the class component.
Yeah.
We can talk more about it in the office hours if you have more questions around this topics or design patterns or designing system. So if you can prepare your questions towards that day, we can discuss them further.
I would also maybe appreciate reading materials around that if you have any. Something that deals with design could work.
I actually have some material that I sent to the last cohort. I will send it about you. It was not about design, but I have a few about design as well. The team published an ebook at some point that was really nice. I will send it to you guys the next few days.
And I just shared a link for Josh Como. He's a really good at React and really good at explaining things. And side note, I don't think he right. He has some chronic pain, so everything is dictated. So that's like extra whoa. But yeah, I really enjoy his explanations.
Thank you, Eva.
Okay, thank you. That was a nice presentation. Good work from our team. And that sparked a lot of discussions, which is really nice. So we move on to the learning module. Hopefully I can make this fast and short. Today we're talking about pair programming, which most of you have been doing, or rather all of you, or all of us at this moment. And I think you would likely have had different experiences with it. Maybe good, both good and bad, or maybe not so good. So the mindset towards programming, it's like an exercise for you to code with your pair, with your colleague or friend or whoever your pairing partner is, and it's more like used where you want to try to come up with optimal solutions together, or probably also when one person is stuck in an issue and they need help. Usually you drive these conversations through pair programming, or it could be you also need to brainstorm solutions to an issue, and you decide to jump on a call or sit together with your colleague on a call to sort it out. So the mindset and attitude when you approach pair programming is to always keep a beginner's mind. Feel free to openly talk about your doubt or what you think is possible or not possible. And it's an opportunity to learn from your parent partner. And it should not be a moment it's not typically shouldn't be about teaching or mentoring, although I think there are cases where if you are mentoring, probably you could also apply some form of pair programming in that sense. But ideally in a workplace, when it's not explicitly stated, it's not a moment for you to teach or mentor someone so that you don't make them feel like they don't know as much as you, or get into the state of mansplaining something they already know. And during pair programming, you also have the concept of a driver who is the person that is mostly doing the typing and navigating the IDE. And then you have the navigators as well. So as a driver, you seek agreement before proceeding. rather than just writing everything in your head without talking to your partner or describing what you are willing to achieve before putting it down in code. And the navigators, you can ask questions and not maybe give comments. So during pair programming, the driver controls the keyboard, like you see usually in the setting, in 2 persons. I think sometimes it could also be more than 2. But I think in this case, when it's more than 2, or usually when you have all of your teammates doing the same, sitting together to try to solve the issue. In this case, you have what we call a mob programming, which I've done a bit in the past, but not so often. It's more often with a pairing with 2 persons. So the driver controls the keyboard and is responsible for writing the code they need in order to accomplish the task. They try to verbalize their thinking processes and think low level about the code, but also I think they should communicate that with their partner before writing down the code, so that the navigator will be able to follow along with what they're trying to achieve. While the navigator pays close attention to the driver, offering guidance, suggestions, and also trying to come up with upcoming questions or challenges for the driver, and acting as the sounding board for the ideas the driver is coming up with. So in this case, you are both bouncing ideas and opinions off each other. I think in many cases, the driver is able to see the navigator is able to see what some points where the driver is missing. Probably they run into some bugs or they miss a syntax. It's usually easy for the navigator to spot. So if you've seen some people doing live coding or live streaming, you see sometimes they run into issues or they miss something, and it's usually the audience who is watching the talk that gives them suggestion like, oh, you missed this on this page or this file. And you can have pair programming remotely, which is what usually happened before it went big during the pandemic. So you have 2 developers on a call or video call with a screen share like we do now, or you've done so far, and the driver shares the screen and codes while the navigator provides questions, provides feedback, asks questions, or suggests some changes. The driver also can push the code to the remote repo where the navigator can pull and locally and also run their own tests. But the driver and the navigator can swap roles. You can interchange roles probably for each issue or for each delivery, or probably after a few like 30 minutes, depends on how you want to drive the parent setting, and you can go around the circles repetitively in this state. And I think that's mostly it for the pair programming. Any questions around that?
No question for me.
Okay. And what have been your experiences so far in the Collab lab with your pair programming? Sandra, how's your experience been like? Good, bad? Do you think it can be improved?
Well, so far my experience has been great. I have learned from each of our team members, and so far it has been good. Yeah, we have been able to communicate really good with each pair I have been working with. So far it's been good.
Nice. Mike, how's it been for you? Do you people usually rotate roles between someone who drives the code and someone watching, or how do you manage those things?
Sorry, can you ask the question again? I wasn't hearing properly.
In general, how is the experience for you? Like, how do you try to manage the sessions?
Pair programming sessions.
Yes.
So far, I think we've been doing a lot more async programming than syncing. So basically, I think the first thing we do is discuss the issue and then bounce ideas around without actually writing the code at first. Then afterwards, we decide on features we can handle according to our strengths, and then we code async, and then we can then come together later and try to review it together and maybe make some corrections while doing some pair programming.
Anyone wants to share about their experience?
Yeah, just what Mike was describing, really. I think we've probably been fulfilling the driver and navigator roles, but not live programming. So once we've had that kickoff chat, somebody has a bash at the code and then gives it to the person in the navigator role to kind of review and question and take a look at it in more detail. So yeah, I think we probably have fulfilled the roles, but yeah, don't think I've kind of got the confidence for live coding yet. So I'm kind of liking to do a lot of prep and planning and research and stuff before I'm ready for live coding, I think.
But before you submit, make the PR, you also get on the call and discuss the changes. Okay, that's also pretty fine. I think that works as well. Also for me, sometimes I also prefer to do it that way because in some cases I need time to think about all the design, come up with suggestions or proposals before joining the call and going through all the suggestions. So I think that also was pretty well that way. Except maybe when there's a bug to solve, maybe I have a colleague who is running into some issues. Like lately, we had something on Kubernetes that we had to go through different files and make changes and deploy. So it's a balance. There's no one defined way of doing pair programming.
I would just like to add, that I think pair programming well is a skill, like a separate skill of work. And yeah, I agree with Peter that like some issues are more well suited for it. Like debugging, I think is great. Like helping unstuck someone is great. Or like approaching, sometimes even like just starting a new task with someone can also just open doors because someone will immediately have an idea, or like you will suggest something and then together it's like, wow. So even like these brainstorming sessions are good. But yeah, I would say like for me personally, I find them more tiring, like especially if they're like longer sessions. But then the cool thing is that you also pick up other things. Like you're like, oh, what's this extension you're using? Or what was this cool keyboard trick that you did? Or what's this resource that like every time I pair program with someone, I get something out that is not maybe like that issue related, but maybe something else. So yeah, I would say that definitely, even if you don't feel confident, like I'm like, like, ugh, like on your own machine, in your own time, you're like, wow, I'm just typing away. And then like you jump on a call with someone, you're like, function, how? Define it now?
Yeah, yes.
Like
That
this,
happens a lot.
everyone feels like that. So like the sooner we're like, okay, this is normal, you also feel like that, like don't judge me by what I just wrote there, like just I can write, okay. And I think we tend to be so hard on ourselves, but like for sure, like if I pair with someone and they're a bit flustered and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything, they forgot something, I'm not gonna think that they're bad at coding. So yeah, I think it's good to get rid of this imposter syndrome, or like people are gonna think I'm incompetent, because it happens to everyone that we confuse things or make silly mistakes, but it doesn't mean anything. So yeah, I would try to embrace it and just do like at least maybe not half, but like do a big chunk of it, or like have a 2-hour session and see what you learn, like all the things that you can pick up there.
Okay, for me, can you hear me?
Yes.
For me, I feel that it works best when you figured out what to code, when you've made your research, or else it should just be a waste of time trying to figure out what to do on the spot. So it's best when you've made your research, maybe figured out, and then you're coming to put everything together, then work out something. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I think I would say it depends. Sometimes I would agree with that point where we've both figured it out. So probably in that case, maybe both persons are new to the topic. So I'm new to the topic. I don't know how to solve it. The other person as well is new to the topic and they don't know how to solve it. And we are just looking at the screen. Or we both have to Google. I have to sit there and watch them Googling, and maybe it will take hours. And I have to, maybe they are Googling a bit different than I do. And I feel like, okay, I just need time to sit down with this issue and look at it. So I think it depends. In some cases, it's been like a session where I'm new to the system and they are trying to solve it. I just want to see their thinking process and also hear them talk about the different parts of the system. So in that case, I'm more like an observing navigator, and they know what they want to set for and what to implement. But in a case whereby we both don't know yet, and we are maybe both of us are also both quite junior, not junior in terms of skills, but like new to the technique, then I think it makes sense to take some time to research or understand the problem, look up what you think might be a solution. And then when you jump to the call, it's easier to talk about what you think might work, and then you try to code it. Then in that case, you are more like running through the different proposals and trying to put it down in code. While in other cases, like I said, with debugging, it could make perfect sense that you don't have to prepare before the debugging session because you don't know what to expect. So you both just walk through. So I think depends on the situation, but also like I most times sometimes I like to prepare so that I have all my design consideration in terms of if I'm thinking about performance or security or some other business criteria. I already worked out the pros and cons and trade-offs to make it faster for the pair programming than when we're just sitting there and we both don't really know what we want. So yeah, it depends. Coming on I think Eva mentioned something about time. Or rather the experience with the pair programming. I think sometimes you might have bad pair programming session. It happens. I've had some in the past. I would say also when you do the session, watch out for your partner's energy and not take too much of their time. I've had pair programming sessions where it took hours. We were just on the code, and at the point I wasn't following anymore. I was just there looking at the screen, and in this case, it was with like a senior colleague or a boss, but at that point, I couldn't contribute mentally because I was so tired. I couldn't follow through anymore, and I was just looking at saying yes to everything. So also watch out for the other person. If you, after like maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes, you can decide to go for a coffee break or a short break so that you can get refreshed and come back to it rather than going for 4 hours non-stop on a pair programming session.
Just last point that I wanted to make is that these days lots of technical interviews also take form of like a pair programming session. Like sometimes even they just want to see you how you think and how you can explain things. So that you are kind of the navigator maybe. So it's definitely something that it's just going to be a part of your work routine, I would say, and it's good to get comfortable with.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about it, there's a couple of resources here you can reach for. I could try to see if I can copy all these links if it's possible. Drop on Slack. Maybe hopefully it works. And you can take time to check them out later. I think that's it for the learning module. We should quickly go through the issues and so we can wrap up the call. Over to you, Eva.
Yeah, sorry that I'm rushing again like last time, but the deal is the same. We will go through the issues quickly now. And if anything is unclear, you're confused about the criteria, feel free to just drop me a line on Slack. So I think if I'm correct, it's going to be not me. Let me just put this away. Not myself. I'm going to put, I think it was Karen and Cassandra that did the first issue. So we're resetting now the teams. So issue number 7, as a user, I want to see a welcoming prompt to add my first item if my list is empty. And so you also get a wireframe. So this is more like just welcoming new users. I think it's quite a straightforward task. Yeah, so it's just going to be writing like a prompt on how to get started. So you have to check the length of the list and things like that. I think it's okay. Yeah, so if you have any questions, just let me know later because I don't want us to be too late. But yeah, check out the wireframe as well. And then issue number 8. So it will be Mike and Sandra, there we go. So we have, as a user, I want to mark an item on my shopping list as purchased so the app can learn how often I buy different items. So this one has a couple kind of like smaller subtasks. So users need a UI that allows them to mark the items as purchased. Yeah, so I don't want to be a spoiler and tell you, but yeah, it just says everything there. The acceptance criteria. So yeah, you need the checkbox. Like we know, when we have input elements, it's nice to associate them with a label because that's helps people that have accessibility issues as well. Checking of the item in the UI also updates the date last purchased and total purchases. And the item is shown as checked for 24 hours after the purchase is made. And then after 24 hours, it unchecks. So there's going to be a bit of state management there. And then the update item function in Firebase.js has been filled out and sends updates to the Firestore database when an item is checked or unchecked. Yeah, so that's kind of going to be quite a few interactions as well as kind of time-based change. Yeah, I think if you will just stop here because we're already a little bit late. But yeah, good luck to the teams for this week. I'll be doing your code reviews. So feel free to just request me as a reviewer, but yeah, I'll keep an eye on you. Let me know through the week if you get stuck or you have any questions. And Peter will have the office hours later this week, I think. Yeah, I think that's it for today.
And the final questions?
No,
Thank you.
no question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.